So thank you to everyone for joining. And for those who are watching afterwards, my name is Sheena, and I am hosting this week's session on professional consent. And I'm happy to introduce Chloe, the facilitator with the expertise and knowledge in this particular area. So before we get started, I think maybe this week, I don't think I've done it before, but I just like to call in my own angels and ancestors, spirit guides, and higher selves, and those of everyone who joins on this call, so that you can feel their support and protection and love. And guidance, I think, particularly for this week and for the rest of this month. So again, thanks for joining, and thanks, Chloe, for being here. So I'll pass it off to you to start.
Thank you, Sheena. Yes, thank you for having me again. And thank you for everyone who's on the call and who will join and possibly listen in later on at home. So let's go ahead and get started. Amazing. So this is consent and mindfulness in the workplace, our conversation on prioritizing wellness and boundaries in professional settings. My name is Chloe. I also do my work as the Reiki, and we're brought to you today by OnePeopleTO, who is the collective that Sheena put so much love and effort into. And so we want to say thank you again for inviting us. We'll open up with a land and black body acknowledgement. So I'll pass that along to Sheena once more.
Right on. Thanks, Chloe. So I just like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that I'm on, and the land on which OnePeopleTO resides, as well as acknowledging wherever you may be, whichever land and treaty that holds your property. I'd like to honor the fact that we are on the traditional territory of many First Nations communities, Inuit, Métis, Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and that we really do have a long way to go beyond truth and reconciliation, and really to a point of recognition and reciprocity and true sovereignty, and really honoring the ways in which Indigenous peoples, particularly in Canada, but really across the world, have experienced genocide on their own land. And myself, as a settler now, I'd like to just take a moment to acknowledge and invite everyone else to acknowledge their part, including OnePeopleTO part in healing and contributing and to honoring the Indigenous ways of knowing and being. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the Black bodies in this space. It's not often that Black bodies are honored and recognized in a loving, gentle, and supportive way, and not being under-surveilled or hyper-surveilled, just allowing our bodies to be present and exist with love. So just honoring everyone's experience that is coming into this space, but particularly the Black body, and that we are, as a community, our story didn't begin with the Middle Passage and or slavery. We have been leaders long before that time and will continue to be. So that is really the work that OnePeopleTO does, and to, bring people to the front who maybe traditionally have not had that opportunity. So again, happy to have these conversations, and I'm even more thrilled to have Chloe facilitating them. So thanks again.
Thank you. I do want to take this time before we get started to quickly plug in my device. We are in the Zoom world and we don't want to have any interruptions. So give me one quick moment. Thank you for your patience. On that note, we'll continue, but just with another warning that it might be the weather in my area, but my internet has been a little bit wonky, so there's possibility of a disconnection. And if there is, we'll do our best to get back on track as soon as possible. So thank you again, Sheena, for our land and Black body acknowledgement. So this is what we'll be covering today. So we'll have a safer space agreement, talk about what that is and how we can invite that into our space today. We'll open our discussion on talking about professional consent and what that can look like, as well as consent at the body layers and defining each one. We'll take a bit of a break. When we come back, we'll look at boundary building in the workplace and how we can facilitate that for ourselves, as well as a tool called the Wellness Umbrella. We'll have a discussion on why wellness matters in our work environment, and then we'll check out with a wellness toolkit activity and the self-safety checklist. So I want to, first of all, before we start explaining what our Safer Space Agreement is, I want to invite everyone to get comfortable in the space in whatever way that looks like for them, whether that is sitting back, whether that is keeping their camera on or keeping it off, getting water, getting something to eat. We want to facilitate a space where we are able to be all together and in a way that feels safe for us. Before we continue, I did get a message just now on a participant that is interested in joining, but the Eventbrite was closed. It looks like that they got it a little bit late. So I'm just going to maybe send over the link for the, okay, excellent. I appreciate our patience. Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna pause share for one moment while. Okay, and we are officially back in business. It's kind of cool, like obviously there are setbacks with doing virtual gatherings, but it is kind of cool that we're able to have space to do things like that.
Definitely.
Well, let's continue. So our Safer Space Agreement looks like 4 major principles. So our first one is assumption checking. So making sure that while we're in space together, we're not making any assumptions on anyone's experience. So allowing others to be the expert on their own experiences. And if we have anything that we want to know, we can simply ask. Honoring our voice and empathetic listening goes hand in hand. Honoring our voice is important because we have very important, vital things to say, and we deserve those things to be listened to. And the accompanying piece to that is allowing ourselves to be open enough to listen and take in what others have to say through a lens of wanting to connect and knowing when to listen and knowing when to share, and being able to work together to create a space where we can do both comfortably. Confidentiality is, of course, important as we navigate conversations on consent. Folks might feel comfortable enough to share personal experience or just open up about things. And it's important that we're sharing, knowing that it's safe to do so, and knowing that if we have something that we would like to share that someone else says or something that deeply resonated with us, again, it's all about asking and just making sure we're allowing others to have to be in the position to consent to sharing their own experiences. And lastly, making sure that we understand that we are in a self-first space, meaning that while we're here and while we're learning together, it's vital in our learning process to be able to put our needs at the forefront. It has been told quite the opposite, especially in educational spaces, that it's pretty normalized to have our needs shelved. And so we want to just remind folks that it's totally okay and totally necessary when we're gathering in this space to put yourself first, whatever that looks like. So if that looks like leaving for a bit, or again, choosing how you'd like to participate, all is totally okay. And if anyone has any access needs, feel free to private message. Same thing, if you'd like me to adjust pacing, we can certainly work on that too. Okay, so let's hop into it. I'd like to open up our conversation on asking, what is consent? So at this point, feel free to share, for those of us that are joining on the call, what you understand consent to be. And we can kind of use that as a basis to form our discussion. So maybe we'll pause here for a couple of minutes while folks think. And feel free to type in the chat as well if you don't want to vocalize or not. Let's see how we feel tonight.
One thing I think of, it's like relates to like some form of communication or something. So I don't know exactly what kind, but it's like definitely related to that.
Totally. Thank you, Gabrielle, and welcome. You're right. Consent is totally about communication, and it's like the basis of communication is one of the basis or the foundational layers of consent. In the chat, Orion says, welcome. Orion says, respecting someone's boundaries, which is certainly, again, another key element to consent, both of which are correct. So we can lay down our knowledge of consent to be an ongoing process where we're able to deny or allow access to our physical, emotional, or energetic bodies. Consent is also the right to have your choices listened to and respected. Consent is mandatory for everyone, so it's not only something that is necessary to talk to strangers about, but is also very important in our close relationships and friendships and working relationships. Consent can always be changed or revoked at any time, so it's not static, it's able to grow with you, and you're able to decide what your boundaries are and if there's been any changes in the things that you're comfortable and uncomfortable with. Through the lens of professional consent, we can understand professional consent to look like a necessary part of a healthy work environment, whereby we have permission to prioritize self-care. So I think this is a crucial point because in a lot of workspaces that we may have had experience with before, prioritizing self-care was not something that was encouraged, quite the opposite actually. And so putting ourselves in the giving ourselves permission to prioritize self-care in our workspaces is radical in itself, but it also allows us to free ourselves from that very harmful mindset of profit or labor over people, and of valuing the things that we can do over how we actually feel in the moment and if we're able to do them. And professional consent can also look like internal unlearning of capitalistic profit over people mindset, as we just touched on, and holding on to and it also looks like holding non-harmful accountability. So in our workspaces, there certainly might be instances where there is harm, whether it is intentional or otherwise. And it's very important that we have practices of workplace wellness and that we're able to fold in professional consent into our working relationships. That way, if there ever is an opportunity to hold accountability for ourselves or to ask others to hold accountability for harm, that we're able to do that or approach that in a non-harmful way. And we'll kind of discuss a little bit more about what that looks like. And if anyone has any questions or anything to add, you're more than welcome to at any time. So consent is not assuming that our practices are the norm. So one thing that I was taught a lot growing up is that we should be treating people how we want to be treated. And this was something that I believed for a long time until I actually heard one of my favorite educators, Kim Kitchen Milan, say in a talk how actually we should be treating people how they want to be treated. Because when we assume that our own practices are the norm, what we do is centralize our own experience and kind of view everyone else's experience through that lens, which is inaccessible and also just kind of not what's happening. And so when we're able to treat people how they want to be treated, we start, first of all, by asking people how they want to be treated, and it allows us to decentralize ourselves in a way that can offer more holistic care to those around us. Consent is not, again, only mandatory for strangers, so it certainly applies to friends, colleagues, families. Consent is not only one conversation, it's something that can evolve and grow, and certainly isn't just something that we only need to speak about once. And it's, on that note, not static, because it can change and grow with you. Consent does not, as an example, does not look like getting annoyed, passive aggressive, or projecting negatively onto others for setting their boundaries. Because when we do so, we give the message to other people that it's not okay for them to set their own boundaries. And even if someone choosing to say no or making a decision that does not center us, if that does not make us feel good, that's certainly okay if we're able to honor our own feelings. But what's not okay is projecting that onto others. And again, telling our loved ones or showing people that it's not okay for them to set their boundaries or make decisions that put themselves at the forefront. So a little bit more on professional consent. So taking into account all the other things we've discussed on consent, professional consent can look like never making assumptions about one's access needs. So if we are, for example, in a place of business that is not online or is online, we can ensure options for things like closed captions, sharing physical access options for in-person spaces, and making sure that those that have access needs don't have to also go through the labor of asking and securing it for themselves. So if possible, making sure that a part of our planning looks like foreseeing access needs, like how, for example, we have closed caption on the call here, and how we're sending recordings out later on so that we're able to, again, not centralize our own experiences based on the access that we as the presenters need, but taking into account what the needs might be for others as well. Professional consent looks like asking for pronouns, looks like not commenting on or providing feedback on someone's work without asking first. It looks like keeping conversations or shared/personal information confidential, whether this is work-related information or otherwise. It looks like honoring our boundaries and allowing others to honor theirs without judgment, and understanding that someone's pace, workplace performance, or their contributions to said workplace does not define them, simply because we are more than just our jobs, and we are a lot more than just the labor that we're able to do while in these jobs. Does anyone have any questions? Are we going at an okay pace so far? Excellent. So we'll be discussing next consent and the body layers. We'll also get into what that even means. So The body layers that we'll be discussing today are the physical, energetic, and emotional body layers. I really love using this slide. I really love reminding people to check their their physical, energetic, and emotional levels. And so we can get into what each of those mean. So the physical body is the first layer of the body that we can see. It's the dense, visible, tangible, includes skin, muscles, bones, or organs, or brain. It's a layer that we spend a lot of our time in. And in Western society, we place a lot of emphasis specifically on physical health. A lot of the times, emotional and energetic health are some things that are treated as secondary or not really even talked about as often. The energy body essentially is the invisible and powerful field that connects us to life itself, or what some might know as subtle life force energy, prana, chi, ki. It's the same thing. It's essentially the energy that we all have access to. It's what animates our bodies. It's what allows for processes like digestion and our heart to beat. It's the things that allows plants to grow. Essentially, again, life itself. Our energy body is sourced in part by our food. It's affected by our breath and other layers of the body as well. So in this case, the physical and the emotional. Our energy body is prone to intake damage, which means that depending on the things that we are experiencing, seeing, intaking, it can have effect on our energy body and kind of how we're feeling as we exist. Our energy body is also connected to things like our chakras, meridians, and other energy systems. Meridians are essentially the pathways to our chakras. The chakras are the energy systems along our spine, and we can kind of think of energy as the blood or what flows in between that. Um, the emotional body is what allows us to process our feelings and our thoughts and our emotions. So it's determined in part by the frequencies of our thoughts and our feelings. So our emotional body is the place where we feel emotions after understanding or interpreting them at the brain level. So our physical body interprets feelings through signals. So for example, if someone were to jump out and scare us, our brain might release cortisol in response to fear. And then right after that, we might feel the emotion. So we can see how the emotional body is actually quite tied to the physical and the energetic as well. Our emotional body also colors the way that we experience the world. A simple example is that if we're having a really amazing day, our outlook on the world that day might be a bit brighter than if we're having a day that is not feeling that good for us. And we might not feel that connected to things that feel amazing. So it again can kind of color our outlook on how we're experiencing things. So in the topic of consent, physical consent looks like asking and waiting for a clear yes before entering anyone's physical space. Can look like not making assumptions based on anyone's appearance, for example, making any assumptions on someone's gender or identity. It looks like refraining from making comments about someone's physical appearance or their body, maintaining friendly body language after someone has set a boundary or told us no is super important, as we previously discussed, because when we display unfriendly body language at someone setting a boundary, we tell them that it wasn't okay for them to set that boundary in the first place. Physical consent also looks like refraining from holding others in an over-sexualizing or subjective gaze without their consent. Emotional consent looks like processing our feelings without processing them onto others. So basically the ability to sit with our feelings and kind of see them for what they are before immediately asking someone else to participate in them. It looks like not taking anyone's feelings or perceptions personally. We're all having our own human experience, and we unfortunately can't really control what others choose to do or what they choose to believe. But what we can control is what is allowed and what our boundaries are. And that's where we can decide what is okay and what is not okay for us. Emotional consent looks like avoiding manipulative behavior, such as guilting or coercing, which is kind of that, oh, come on type energy when someone has told us no. It looks like offering content warnings before bringing up certain subjects that might trigger or upset others. It looks like allowing others to choose themselves first, even when we're disappointed or upset by that, which again is a practice. And finally, looks like not setting ourselves and our own experiences as the standard. So understanding that we're all coming from our own places of experience and expertise, and there's enough room to hear everyone's experience without needing to kind of superimpose our own experiences over that. Energetic consent looks like capacity checking. So asking friends and family if they have the space for something before we share it. Looks like being conscious of what our own capacity is and setting boundaries accordingly. It looks like understanding when others might need to take some time or space to recharge. Being mindful of the space that you take up. So, reading the room, passing the mic. It looks like respecting and appreciating the labors of others, which can also look like never volunteering another's labor without asking their permission. And finally, allowing ourselves to feel hard feelings on our own before sharing with the loved one, which kind of again connects back to our point on projecting, which is that it's certainly okay to share our feelings if they're hard or if they're heavy, but it's very necessary for us to at least be able to look at them on our own first, or at least sit beside them if we can't really interact at the moment. Whew, okay, so that's been a lot of information. It's 7:33. We're going to take a 10-minute break and meet back at 7:44 for the second half of our time together. Please feel free to grab some water, move around, look at something that's not a screen. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to put that in the chat.
Awesome stuff. Thanks, Chloe.
See everyone in 10 minutes. Hi everyone, just giving a 2-minute heads up that we will be coming back together at 7:44. Hello everyone, it is 7:44, so we should officially be back from our break. Just want to do a quick check-in that we're all back, we're all ready to continue. Thank you. I see some people putting up emojis. Awesome. So let's continue. So we're going to be discussing boundaries next. So what are boundaries? Boundaries are essentially rules or practices that we need in order to feel respected and to feel safe. Boundaries are things that we like and want more of, and also things that we don't want in our lives at all. So in that way, they are ways that we let others know how we need to be treated. Cross boundaries usually leads to mistrust and lack of safety. And so we show people that we care about them by listening to and respecting what their boundaries are. So boundaries specifically in the workplace are especially crucial. This is because personal wellness is not a personal problem. There is space for care and for work. So if we are coming into our workspaces and we're not bringing our whole selves, meaning if we're coming into our workspace and we're feeling depleted in any way, or we're feeling unable to do our tasks, and if we are experiencing the need for more kindness or for more time to ourselves, then that's something that unfortunately has been treated historically as a personal problem in the workplace. But we are not going to be our best working selves if we don't feel like our best selves in general, or if we don't feel safe enough to address the things that we need to feel safe. And so it's especially crucial for us to take time for our own personal wellness, especially for those that are working, especially for those of us that are in queer bodies and racialized bodies, whose labors have been treated as disposable for the most part, and whose bodies have been treated as disposable. For us to use this again, not only as an act of resistance, but a radical act to care for ourselves while we are participating in a system of labor for money and money for life, which, is unnatural. So it's okay if we need some extra time for ourselves during this process. So just a couple of reminders that our boundaries are for us to decide. Consent can be changed or withdrawn for any time and for any reason, and it's completely up to you if you'd like to explain yourself, if you'd like to open up that channel of conversation for people that you're setting boundaries with. You are not responsible for others' reactions to your boundaries. A very important thing for us to remember, as folks might feel upset or might even have adverse reactions sometimes when we're laying down certain boundaries. And even though that might not feel good in our bodies, it's important to remember that people's feelings are their feelings to feel. And even if those feelings are in response to our own boundary setting, that ultimately we're not responsible for anyone else's reaction to the things that we need to feel okay. Another important thing to remind ourselves is that we are all consistently learning and unlearning. So to allow some patience to yourself for that, and that it's never ever too late to transmute your energy or to change your mind on anything. So I'd like to share with everyone a little tool called the wellness umbrella. So I feel like there are certain words sometimes that have kind of become buzzwords, that things like energy and wellness and spirituality that we might hear a lot, but we might not really understand them always in a given context. And so with the term wellness, I wanted to break it down to some practices that we can include under the umbrella of wellness. So these are mine, but you're more than welcome to consider some other things that you might put into your own personal wellness umbrella if these also resonate. So this looks like maintaining a work-life balance. So allowing a process of immersion, so working when you're working and extracting, not working when you're not working, and having clear boundaries between when you are working and when you are having time for yourself or when you're having time for other things. Critical thinking is particularly important. Critical thinking is essentially the process by which we reflect on the things that we're doing and we ask questions about harm. We also ask questions about intention and really spending time, again, in that reflective piece and really allowing ourselves to critique the things that we see around us and the things that we're participating in to see if they actually benefit us or if they actually benefit our communities. The wellness umbrella to me will include non-screen time. This is particularly important, especially given the era we're in now, where so much of our work and so much of our in-person, face-to-face time has been replaced with screen time. And for those that had very specific or have very clear practices regarding screen time, a lot of that has been changed and altered. And so we want to make sure that we're still allowing some space to look at things that aren't a screen, that we are relieving the pressure from our screaming eyeballs and, maybe just doing something else for a moment. Or I like to just lay there. It's just unbelievably gratifying to lay and do nothing and just like look at the ceiling. A rest and reward system essentially is the system that we all have by which we allow ourselves to have rest and by which we reward ourselves. Sometimes our rest and reward system becomes out of whack and we treat rest as a reward rather than allowing rest to go hand in hand with reward. Thinking that we have to earn our ability to sit down, we have to do a certain amount of tasks to earn or to deserve the ability to rest or to lay, which simply is not true. So kind of checking in with what our own internal rest and reward system is allows us to give ourselves gifts of rest or whatever other rewards without making that contingent upon your labor every time. The wellness umbrella also includes capacity check-ins with others, but also with ourselves, getting into the practice of asking, what do I have the space for today? And proceeding from that place rather than what do I have to get done today? It helps us to prioritize ourselves rather than prioritize our labor or our efforts or the things that we need to get done, which of course matter, and I'm sure we do have to get them done, but again, if we are not coming from a place of wellness, then it might not be that simple to complete our tasks as it would be if we're able to spend some time with ourselves first and then allow ourselves to be in service or ourselves to work in whatever way we need to. Lastly, self-reflection goes hand in hand with critical thinking. It again is that opportunity to sit back and just kind of be introspective on the things that are working, the things that are not working, checking in with our capacity, but also our boundaries, the things that we don't want, the things that we want more of. And self-reflection allows a lot of space for us to exist however we need to, and also allows that space for us to formulate how we want to communicate our needs with others once we have that conversation with ourselves first. Is this making sense to everyone so far? Is this okay, Payson? Excellent. So I'd like us to have a little bit of a discussion now on what we can understand or what we've gathered from our understanding of wellness in the workplace. And I would like us to talk about, why does wellness matter to me in my workplace? So I could start the conversation off. So right now I do a lot of work as a holistic health educator. I'm a consent educator. I'm a Reiki practitioner. I work with youth. But I actually had, my original career background was in corporate. And so I worked for the YMCA right after high school. And I ended up working at their head office while I was in university. And so that's kind of where my working life first officially started as a full-time employee. And so that experience taught me a lot about what I did not want and what was not working for me in my workplace. So it was in that environment where I could see clearly how the people that I worked with very much so valued my labor and my efforts and the things that I was able to get done over myself as a person. And I was actually not encouraged to do things like take time for myself or look into my own mental health or prioritize my mental health over my work. And so in that environment, it really showed me, again, the workplace that was not going to work for me, and that allowed me the ability to seek other things and to find myself in spaces that aligned with my own boundaries and my own idea of what wellness looked in the workspace. And so now my career looks a lot differently, and that itself is a massive privilege. So I'd like to acknowledge that as well. And it is really beautiful to now be in spaces where wellness is always at the core of what we talk about, and work is a facet of that, not necessarily the entire thing. And so personally, wellness matters to me in my workplace because although for some of us we might have been sold the idea that what we do is who we are, that's just simply not true. And so if we are finding ourselves in workspaces that don't feel good and that don't allow us to feel valued, if we have the ability to look elsewhere or to create that space to invite different opportunities to us, then we might find ourselves in workspaces that feel better in our bodies and that we don't have to recover from when we go home, which is super important. So I'd like to open up the floor for anyone else who would like to share on why wellness matters to them in their workspace, or any other experiences or anything that we've talked. We can pause here for a couple of minutes if anyone wants to chat or vocalize.
I just want to say that was awesome. And like, I feel like I just learned so much, and it's just percolating right now, most of it. Um, I was curious about something. So one of the, one of the things, and I forget exactly, but it was like about reacting to when someone's saying a boundary. Okay, and as someone who has a hard time setting boundaries if someone gets upset, and I carry that with me. Um, uh, I like I I guess I want it to also be okay for someone to be upset too, or something, but like how to negotiate that, like it just feels like a bit of a gray space a little bit. So I don't know if you had any thoughts about that. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you for being here, Gabrielle, and for being so kind. I'm really glad you brought that up. That actually came up in our last workshop on consent as well, when you brought up that point. Someone wanted to know, how do I do that without like betraying myself if I'm actually feeling upset, but also, holding space for someone else? And I think that a simple answer to that is transparency. So there are definitely, although it can feel really tight when we are expressing something that we know others might have a reaction to, coming at it from a space of wanting to connect, and also from a space of just being clear on what's happening. So for example, if I'm the one experiencing something in my body after someone is saying no, saying, I want you to know that I care about that, what you just said, but I'm feeling this in my body. And so what I'm going to do right now is take 5 minutes. Or what I'm going to do right now is go on a walk and come right back, or maybe take the afternoon to think about it. And so if we're in the space where we're able to vocalize or otherwise communicate what's happening, then I find some of that gray area can at least be clarified, if not solved in the moment. And on the other side of that, if you're the one experiencing emotions or feelings in your body as a result of being told no, or is worrying about that reaction in someone else, it can also be understanding that once we feel something, it's kind of like being tossed a ball. And so there are options, when you're tossed a ball, you can kind of immediately pass it on, or you can kind of sit with it for a sec. And I feel like in this space, this is a great example of it. So if we're told no, or there's a hard boundary set and we're feeling it, it's entirely possible to hold on to it and say, hey, by the way, this is what's in my hands right now. No blame, I'm not angry, even if that's something that feels comfortable to vocalize before, feeling the need to toss it on. I hope that was helpful, Gabriel.
Yeah, it definitely adds to it for sure. And I like the ball. It is helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Amazing. No pressure, but we'll pause here if anyone else has anything else they'd like to add. Otherwise, we'll continue on. We have a bit more to go, but we're over a lot of the info parts, so.
I'll just jump in and say, yeah, I mean, whether you work in a physical space, like a place that's outside of your home, oftentimes the work that you do is connected to wellness, even though you don't really know it, like your own personal wellness, like how you show up and if you can show up, and the people that you interact with, and now how they impact or support your everyday experience. And even if you work by yourself, anyway, because of the work that I do, and it's interesting, you talk about energy, but I think it's palpable, like when you go into a space and you can feel that other people don't really respect you or acknowledge you or whatever, and all of that I think falls under wellness. Yeah, so it's essential, and I'm so happy to have this conversation.
Thank you. It totally is. Even from corporate stance, the weird hierarchy, there are feelings involved. There are a lot of feelings involved, and they pretend that there isn't, but there certainly is, and a lot of ego. And so, yeah, I love that you brought that up, because wellness is literally a part of everything. It's just whether or not we're acknowledging it or not. Okay, awesome. Well, the floor is still open as we continue. So if anyone else does think of anything that they'd like to share, you're more than welcome to put in the chat. This is our activity. I love using this little dog. He makes me laugh. And so our workplace wellness activity is going to look like building a little bit of a toolkit. So if you'd like, you can grab something to write with. Otherwise, I'm sure your computer's fine if you'd like to type it. And so what we're going to do is write down 3 tools that we can place in our kit to help us feel equipped in our workspaces. So some prompts on the tools that we can write down are asking yourself, what do you need? What can you give yourself while you're in your working space? What feels comfortable? And we can envision practicing adding each tool to our kits before we enter a working environment. And so that can look like physically envisioning, if you'd like, each thing going in our little invisible knapsack as we go to work or as we enter in our working spaces for the day. Or this can look like an affirmation that you write down of 3 things that you need or would like to call in. Ooh, sorry. And yeah, so I'd like to maybe pause for a moment so we can think about that and write down our tools. And then if you like, we can have a moment of sharing. So maybe we'll pause here for a couple of minutes. And please let me know if you have any questions or clarification, if you need any clarification on the activity. So how does it sound if we maybe start by pausing here for a couple of minutes? And then if we are finished, you can just type in done in the chat. So I know that we're all done and ready to move on. So I'm seeing in the chat, thank you, Michael. So some people are finishing. Is there anyone else that might need, I think Gabriel might be finished too. Is there anyone else that might need a couple more moments? Okay, great. So for those that are finished, if you'd like to, you're welcome to share your 3 tools that you've come up with to include into your kit. And we can carve out some time here to share what our tools are with one another. Maybe you might get inspired by what our other people might have in their toolkits. Excuse me.
Sure, I can share.
Yeah.
I couldn't come up with any creative names for them or anything, but personally, I think what you said about the affirmations is something that I could personally use a lot. I'm the kind of person that needs a lot of validation, and sometimes there aren't people around me to give me that validation. So to have affirmations could be a good way to give me kind of what I need in that sense. And the second one that I got was separating work from like my social life or like just relaxing and stuff and school. Right now I'm doing all 3 in like my tiny little room, and it's hard to kind of differentiate all of that. So maybe I remember you saying something about kind of carving time for, you know, having them separated, and that's something that personally I could use a lot. And I couldn't come up with a third one, but those are 2 ones that I really need. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for being here. I think those are great. Affirmations, you're right, are an awesome way to give ourselves that validation. And they're great because if we're able to write them or put them somewhere we can see them every day, it just reminds us of those feelings whenever we look at them, which can certainly help us while we're in working spaces. And I totally feel you on doing all work in like one room, and how it can kind of just like blend into one block of time. So yeah, I think one thing that might be helpful is like scheduling out chill time. If that's something that resonates, it might help kind of differentiate those blocks of time, or having working time or a working deadline for the day. Thank you for sharing. Those are awesome.
That sounds like a great idea. I should probably get to that.
Excellent. Would anyone else like to share?
I'll go ahead. My physical space is important. So Michael, I kind of work in the same space. And so I find the smallest of spaces or the biggest of spaces, it will get put dirty or just untidy very quickly. And that affects like my ability or my capacity. So just trying to like maintain my space as much as I can, but also like not stressing out of the fact that, there are things to be done. A blanket and crystals. So like, just so it doesn't have to be crystals, but I love crystals, and it's something that I can hold on to and de-stress kind of. So those are my things.
Oh, I love that. I love the blanket. Yes, blankies in the workplace, necessary. I could share mine. I think my 3 things in I'm like, I should probably consider this for myself too. Things that I definitely need and can give myself in working environments is transparency. So, with those that I'm working with, but also being real with myself on what I'm able to do that day, or, what's not going to work for me. I think gentleness for myself, but also in all my working relationships, is something that's been a really like unexpected and a wonderful part of transitioning from like corporate work to community work. There's just so much like grace and kindness, which is just so lovely, and it reminds me to be nice to myself. And I think resting, which is something I really struggle with, is just like stop. Like, my relaxing is like a very tense way of relaxing that is not relaxing at all. And so allowing time to actually chill is very necessary. Is there anyone else that would like to share what's in their toolkit before we move on? Okay. If anyone changes their mind, again, you're always welcome to put that in the chat. We still have a little bit more time together. So moving on, I'd love to share a tool that I made called the Self-Safety Checklist, which I'm really excited to share because we'll likely have this as a PDF slide deck so people can have access to this after and use it as something to possibly check in with themselves or build their own self-safety checklist. So sometimes when we're in really stressful situations or there's high emotion or anxiety, it can be difficult to access the parts of our brain that allow us to sit and have conversations with ourselves. And so preparing a self-safety checklist is something that we might be able to kind of check in very quickly in the moment, and to ground ourselves in what we actually are feeling and what we actually need. So there's 2 columns, the do I feel column, the do I need column. And under do I feel, we have, do I feel cared for? Do I feel respected? Do I feel listened to? Do I feel like my boundaries matter? And then on the other side, we have the do I need. So do I need alone time? Do I need affirmations? Do I need to check in with myself? Do I need to rest? So again, these are just prompts that we can read if we're ever in high aroused situations, or if we're ever feeling like we can't get grounded in what's actually going on in our body and our minds. It can be a way, again, to offer a bit of a check-in and to kind of just see what's going on, and if there's anything that we can gift ourselves in that moment to help us feel a little bit better. So we are basically at the end of our time together today. So for our checkout, we're going to do a head, heart, checkout. So you can choose to do one or all three. So for head, which is what is something new or interesting that you've learned today. Heart is how you feel about our time together. And is just something that you'll be sitting with or thinking about going forward. And so for our checkout, for those that want to check out, we'll say our names and our pronouns and the head, heart, or and again, feel free to put that, into the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself. But we'll allow a couple of minutes before our wrap up and our closing announcements.
I can go. So my name's Gabrielle, they, them. For head, I'd say organizing it into like energetic, body and emotional. Actually, haven't taken in maybe recently or ever. And so that was actually really nice. And that felt like something new in terms of ways of thinking about that in relation to boundaries. And I'm feeling really great about our time together. This was awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you for being here, and thank you for checking out. Is there anyone else that would like to check out?
I will go ahead. So Sheena, she, her, and what's something new or interesting? Definitely the well place tools, which actually made me think about how I had, like in my corporate space, that there were really none. Well, I had my own setup, but yeah, it was like really to deflect from everything that was happening. So that made me very aware. How do I feel about our time together? I feel comforted, and this was loving and gentle. So thank you, everyone, for being here and for that and contributing to that feeling. Something I'll be sitting with and thinking about is really like how I can make sure that I'm in a workplace that encourages the boundaries and wellness as a parallel conversation to the work that's being done.
Amazing. Thank you, Sheena. Is there anyone else that would like to check out before we move on to the closing part of our time together? No pressure.
Sure, I can go.
Yeah.
So name is Mike or Michael. Pronouns are he, they. And something I learned today is, well, the one that stuck with me the most is the fact that I can gift myself things, especially the word gift is something that really interested me today. I'm kind of used to the idea that like you just have certain things and you kind of have to deal with things, but the fact that I can give myself time and that I can give myself certain things has been really interesting to me. And how I feel about our time together, I feel really happy. This is really informative, and I'm so excited to apply this to like my current workspaces and literally all of the future workspaces that I will have. And something that I'll be sitting on, probably how spirituality and all that stuff works into my workplaces, because I haven't really thought about that until today. But I think it's really interesting, and I'll be thinking about that in the future as well. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Michael. Thank you again for coming. And I'm so glad to hear that that's what stuck, how we are able to gift ourselves, because we've really been duped. We've been lied to. We definitely don't have to work so hard to earn just a crumb, please, just a crumb of self validation. No, we're able to gift that to ourselves. And I love to hear that. For anyone else, if you'd like to check out, you're more than welcome to in the chat as we close up. I just want to remind everyone that we are all still learning. Again, allowing ourselves tons of patience to learn and unlearn in this process. It literally does not stop. So you don't have to feel rushed, or you don't have to feel guilty or shamed if you don't know everything right now, because this is an ongoing process and I promise you will take the rest of your life. So it's okay. We can give ourselves some grace as we're navigating learning and unlearning. So just a little bit of upcoming workshops. So this workshop has been a part of OnePeopleTO's Crucial Consent Conversation series. So far we've done workshops on parent-to-child consent. We've done workshops on body consent and sexual consent. Today's is workshop and professional consent. And our last workshop is coming next Tuesday, same time at 7 o'clock. The same, is it the same link, Sheena? It might be a different link. Yes, same link. And this time it'll be on healthcare and consent while aging. So we'll talk a little bit on consent through the ages, how to extend consent for those that are elderly, for example. Yeah, and what that'll look like. So you're more than welcome if you have the time and would like to join us. And lastly, just reminding, my name is Chloe again. I also do my work as the Reiki Healer. You're more than welcome to visit my website or Instagram. There are a couple more workshops coming up, including a decolonizing creativity workshop that I'll be doing with Ryerson, all free. So yeah, you're more than welcome to check that out. And thank you again for coming, everyone. This has been our time. I'll pass it on to Sheena to just close us up.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Just want to say thank you to you and thank you to everyone for joining. I'll send this recording out after we're done here. And I'll probably include the one from last week as well. Yeah, just I'm grateful for the space and I'm grateful for everyone's just presence. So that in itself is a gift. So thank you. And I hope you have a great evening, whatever you get up to. Hopefully it's a little bit of relaxation. So, okay. Have a great evening, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.